Hello viewers, today we are going to see how to fetch user information from Okta via Angular application. In earlier videos we already saw how to authenticate Angular application via Okta SSO, and this would be the continuation video of that playlist. So you can find the playlist in the link which I provided in the description below. So let's get started. To give you guys an overview, let me show you the project structure. We have three different components called dashboard, details and app component as well. Whereas dashboard component is not secured, details is secured, which means when you hit that endpoint, you'll be interrupted with a login page. In this case, Okta login SSO will interrupt the component when you're trying to access this route. We already developed all this application in previous videos, so do check out the playlist if you want to know how to authenticate an Angular application via Okta SSO. Now we are going to see how to fetch user information once we logged in. Right? This is the part after authentication. Once the Angular app is authenticated, you'll be able to access the route. In that case, how we are going to fetch who logged in and what would be his email and what would be his name. Basically, that's what we are trying to do here. To get started with, we can go ahead and Google some keywords about it, right? Get info about the user. About the user, Okta. This sort of information will give you Okta documentation, where you can click on the first link and the instruction says instructions for, whereas a drop down. This is for React. Now we are going to see Angular instructions. So click on Angular and that will give you a simple piece of code that we have to implement. Now in this case it's a profile component. In our case it will be a details component. The reason we are going with details component is because it's a secured one. Let's go to structure again. And here dashboard, you can access dashboard without any login page, but you can't access details component without any login page. So when we log into these details, we are going to see how to fetch who logged in, how to fetch the information of who logged in. Now let's go ahead and add the same structure what you're seeing on the right side to details component. So basically we have three parts here. One is declaring a variable called username, which is of data type string. And we are going to import Okta auth service into constructor, and we are going to make use of this Okta auth constructor to get user information via get user method. So let's go to details component.ts file and declare a variable called username. And now let's declare a Okta auth service. Now this is not imported. Now let's go ahead and import it. Out of these two packages, we have to consider Okta/Angular. That's what we can see here. So I'm going to import the same class from same package, Okta auth service. Once we are done with this thing, the third part would be changing this on ng onInit lifecycle method. In this case, we have asynchronous keyword followed by await keyword. They are tied up. When you use asynchronous keyword to ng onInit method, you are supposed to make or prefix any of the user with this await keyword. So let me go ahead and add it. This would be asynchronous. And here we are going to make use of Okta auth. This .Okta auth is nothing but the variable what we declared here. And this will have generic methods by itself. We are going to make use of get user method here. As we already know, if you are trying to make use of async, we have to prefix this Okta auth user Okta.getUser with await. We are good now. In this case, this returns a particular value, and that would be captured in a constant variable called user claims. We have a special reason of why we are trying to use this user claims as a keyword or a variable name. We'll come back to that later. The reason is because this get user will return the claims, and what will be in claims we are going to discuss later, right? So now user claims will have a name property in it. That's what we are trying to see here, right? And now this is assigned to the already declared username variable. We declared a username variable here. We are going to assign user claims.name property to username. So we are good for now. Now we have a variable called username which has name property from user claims. All we have to do is display this username property within the HTML. So let's go to details.component.html and use interpolation to display it. So now we have everything in place according to this document. They didn't say about the HTML, but that's the idea. When you have a variable, we use interpolation to display it on the HTML. Now let's go ahead and run this project. Cool. The project is up and running now, and it is running on localhost 4200. As you can see here, I'm going to hit that endpoint. When you hit this root component, we redirected this root component to dashboard. So when you hit it, you'll directly end up in dashboard component. You see, it went to dashboard route and it is not secure. That is the reason you can see dashboard works component here. And we have a details page here, but details component is secured. So when you click on it, we are expected to log in. We can't directly access this details page because that's an secured component. So let's go ahead and hit on details. You see, we have a login page by Okta. This is called Okta SSO that we implemented earlier. You can find all the information like how we implemented this on the previous tutorials. So please do check out all the playlists to know how to authenticate Angular application via Okta SSO. So let me log in. You see, when you log in, you can see personal details, and this is secured component. That's what I made it as a text to explain that this is a secured component, and you can see that it landed on the details route. But something is missing. You know what? We have a welcome followed by username here, but we can see that username. So what might be the issue? Let's go to console and check it. You can go to console by Ctrl+Shift+I, pressing them at a time. Now when you go there, we don't see anything because we didn't log anything. So let's go ahead and log something to make sure whether it's fetching all the user claims or not. So let me do console.log. I'm going to print user claims as an object. Now we can see user claims object, and let's expand it. We don't have anything called name property. We are trying to access name property from user claims object, but user claims has only subject or sub, which is nothing but the user ID. It has got only one property, and we are not accessing that. We are not trying to access something which is not available, that is name property, and we are assigning that property to username which is not available. That is the reason we don't have any value rendered in the interpolation itself. So let's see why this is happening. And before digging deep into it, let's make this page a bit good looking. Let me try to add CSS. I'm going to use Bootstrap 4 to implement some Bootstrap classes, and we'll make this look a lot better than this. Basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put a logout button followed by some text, and this is all coming from the router outlet, basically details component, but I'm maintaining this logout button within a separate tag itself, and I'm making these two changes in app component.html. And the reason we have logout button is we are logged in. So when you log in, you need to have logout button. If you don't log in, you don't have to. So logout button is implemented to explain that we are currently logged in via Okta. So let's go to app.component.html and make these changes. So currently we have one button and we have a router outlet as well. Now let me implement Bootstrap to this particular application via CDN. So let me go ahead and check for CDN. You can Google like Bootstrap CDN or Bootstrap 4 CDN. This is just a link that you can copy. So let's go to the first link and you can copy the CSS. You have a copy button over here, copy it, and let's go to index.html and paste it. Now your project is ready with Bootstrap 4. Now let me go to application.component.html and make those changes. to make the screen look better. You can see already that there is some change happened within the font and the look and feel of button as well. Now we are going to change this a lot, and we have a button here. Right. Now I'm going to put all this content into something called container. Container is nothing but a class within Bootstrap 4. I'm going to make use of the existing class. You see, when you use a container, it got a margin and padding. It was set to middle of the page, not exactly middle, but it gave some padding and margin as well. Now I'm going to add some more classes to it, and I'm going to add a border to it so that you can see better. We have different classes called border. You see, we have a gray border there. Now I can add another class to make it look a lot better. That is border primary. This is another class which gives us the blue color border. And I can also add another thing called rounded, which will give us a rounded corner for that border. Currently it is rigid. Now you can see that it's changing to rounded. And still we have some padding issues. Why? Because the logout button is stuck to the wall. So I'm going to give some padding for about 1%. You see, now it looks good and it's not sticking to the wall. Now I'm going to put these conditions, put these components within the rows and columns so that it's better looking. Currently logout button is up top. It doesn't make any sense. I want to put it to the right and all the component stuff to the left, which means this button should be to the right of this component or to the container, and this router outlet, all the routes or the components which are getting routed should be on the left. How can I do that? I can do that with Bootstrap grid layout. Let me try to create a row and some columns in it. We have a row class and we have a column class. I'm trying to implement all these things. Don't worry about it. I'm trying to implement all these things via Bootstrap 4 documentation. We can refer to this Bootstrap 4 documentation. You can clearly see how you can develop a simple page that looks great. So now I'm going to create a new class, create a div with a new class called column 10. The reason I'm trying to give column 10 is because grid layout should have total 12 columns within whole page. The page width is divided into 12 columns. I can divide it into any margins. For example, 6 and 6. I can create 2 6 columns, or I can create 1 10 column and 1 2 column. That adds up to 12, right? So div.call 6, sorry, call 2. Now this column 10 and this column 2 will give up total 12 grid. Now let me paste this button onto the second column, which I just created, and route outlet to the first column, which I just created. We can format it. Now you can see the effect. You see, we have logout button not to the right, and we have welcome and personal details secured, so details component to the left. Now we can add some more classes to the button to make it look better. We have a class called btn that will give you this kind of look with the rounded corners like that. We also have another class called button primary that is going to give you the blue color button. It looks good, right, compared to the previous one. So now let's dig into why didn't we get any username after welcome. That is the main issue. Now we are going to dig into it and see why it's happening. So the reason is because of claims and scopes. Basically, what is a claim? Claim is nothing but user information, and scope is what kind of user information that you can see. Let's go to Okta preview page and see how it looks like. Let me go to admin page. Let me switch to classic UI, security, API. I'm going to use default authorization server to authenticate all these things or authorize all these things. So let's go to default. You see, we have claims and scopes here. Claim is nothing but what kind of user information to be displayed. We already have a claim and we can live with it. and scopes. We have these different types of scopes, and each and every scope can display or give you only certain attributes of user. We have a profile, user profile, and it has got all these attributes, and only certain attributes are available for each and every scope. For example, username, given name, full name, these sort of attributes will come under profile scope. You can get all these attributes only if you pass profile to Okta. Profile as a scope to Okta. If you don't pass profile as a scope, you won't get all those stuff. If you want email, you have to pass email scope to Okta. If you don't pass email scope, you won't get email back from Okta. So that is the reason we have to know what kind of attributes are tied to what kind of scopes as well, right? So to know that, we have Okta documentation as well. We can Google something like scope dependent claims Okta. Click on first link, and we can search for scope dependent claims. We got a link, click on that and see. You can see all the attributes or properties followed by required scope. If you want a name that we tried to render earlier, you have to pass profile scope to Okta. If you want something like given name, you have to pass profile scope to Okta. If you want middle name, you have to pass profile scope to Okta. Similarly, if you want something like email, you have to pass email scope to Okta. So now let's see what kind of scopes we have currently and why we are unable to fetch the name, right? So currently we have what kind of scopes, we don't know that. How to know that how many scopes or what scopes do we have? We can do it in two ways. One thing is, let's go to app.module.ts and we configured Okta config here, but we are not passing any scopes. Now there is another way to check what kind of scopes we have. That is, let's go to app.component.html. Here we have a router outlet, and what is trying to render in the router outlet? Details component. So let's go to details component.ts. So this is where we are trying to get user claims. So now I'm going to do something interesting, right? Console.log, I'm trying to get access token from Okta auth service itself. So now I log this access token from Okta auth service, and let's see what we have in the access token object. So we have a big token. Whenever we are trying to call Okta via login page, that will create an access token and pass it to Okta so that it can authenticate. Now we got a token. Let me go ahead and decode this token. How can I do that? We can decode any JWT token on jwt.io. Let's go here and paste the token what I got in the console. This is nothing but, the token is nothing but encoded string of this payload what we have here. Basically when we decrypt it, you can see the payload and we can see the scope. SCP defines the scope here. We have a scope called OpenID, which we saw in scope section of security. Here we have OpenID here. We didn't pass any scope, but by default it's going to take OpenID. So in order to get a name, we have to pass a scope called profile. So that is the reason we didn't get any name back from Okta. Why? Because we have only OpenID scope, but to fetch a name we need profile scope. And how can we pass it? Let's go to Okta config and add that scopes. Let's go to app.module.ts, but because Okta config is defined here, let me add a new thing called scopes. And the default one is OpenID, and I'm going to add two different scopes called profile and email, because I want email as well as I want name as well. To get a name, I need a profile scope, so I added profile here. And to get an email, I need email scope, so I added email as well. This is the email, this is email scope, I added email as well. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this one. And let's log out and log in again. Dashboard works. Let's go to details component. You see, we got a name here. And when you take a look at the user claims object, you got a lot of stuff. Other than email, you got a lot of stuff, and all these are coming from profiles, OpenID, and email as well. As we passed email scope, we got the email back. As we passed profile scope, we got all this stuff back. Now all we have to do is play with it. Now I'm going to fetch email out of this user claims object and display it on the screen. How can we do that? It is pretty simple. It is same as we did for name object. Sorry, user details component dot name property. Let's go here. Now we have username. Similarly, I'm going to create a new property for email. Let me call it email ID. I'm going to assign user claims dot email to this dot email ID. Now we have an email property from user claims object, which is assigned to email ID already. Now let me go to details component.html and add an interpolation to it. You can see it immediately reflecting on the screen on the right side, and your email ID is blah blah blah. We have that email ID coming from this email property. And I did a mistake when I'm trying to do some research and development on this video, and the mistake is changing the email on profile object. What does that mean? Let me go to Okta preview again. Let's go to directory, click on people. And this is my profile, this is my user. So click on that username and you'll get a profile section over here. So here we have very few attributes populated called username, first name, last name. Some of these things are missing, and we have a primary email as well. As part of R&D, I changed this email to example@outlook.com for testing purposes. And what happened is when I logged out of this Okta, I was unable to log back again with my email ID. This is basically my username, so I was unable to log in back. The reason is because Okta considers this primary email or email as username. So when I changed it to example@outlook.com, I was supposed to log in with example@outlook.com, which I didn't know. So that is the reason I couldn't log in. So please do not change this primary email unless it's really necessary. That's one thing we are trying to make mistake sometimes. So when we go to the details component, it's working pretty good. We got the name component, sorry, we got the name, and we also got the email from Okta Auth service. That's all. Thanks for watching.